First of all, literalism, the heresy of the 20th century. Of course, I'm using a title here that's going to make people interested and want them to come. You know, you never choose a title that's not going to get people interested and piqued. So let's start with a few definitions of terms. First is that of literalism. And literalism is adherence to the explicit sense of a given text or doctrine. Literalism doesn't just exist in religion, of course. It exists in English. It exists in all sorts of different disciplines. Today we're talking specifically about its use within the Christian religion. But the idea that it's an adherence to the explicit sense of given text or doctrine. And then the second word in that title that we need to talk a little bit about is heresy. And people define heresy differently. If you type in heresy to Google, you'll find 50 different definitions. So I chose the one I liked. That's how it works in theology. You choose the one you like. When a legitimate point of belief is overemphasized to the neglect of other equally legitimate complementing, occasionally countering points of belief needed to make up the delicate balance of doctrines in an orthodox rule of faith. Real easy. Easy definition there. But the point is, theology is a balance. Think about it. You know, Christians articulate that Jesus was both God and human. And there have been heresies throughout history that have emphasized one to the detriment of the other. Adoptionism emphasized the humanity of Jesus to the point that the divinity was obscured. And then there were, I can't remember one of the divinizing ones, but there were, well, Gnosticism. All the Gnosticisms you read about, the ones the Da Vinci codes are based in the divinity of Jesus. You know, even to the point of some of the Gnostic Gospels saying that Jesus somebody was crucified in the place of Jesus, and Jesus was actually sitting to the side laughing while this other guy was crucified for him. You know, some strange stuff over on that side. So theology, if you look at, for instance, the historical creeds, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, they're about a balancing act of holding up two things that we know, or three or four things. You know, in the case of the Trinity, we're holding up three things, and we're trying to keep them in balance. Heresy is when somebody becomes obsessed with one particular part of it and throws the rest of the balance off, and you lose part of the Christian witness. Now, the other thing you have to understand is this word down in here that says orthodox, because that gets used in different ways these days. Orthodox simply means correct belief, or kind of the general belief of the church throughout the ages. That's kind of what orthodoxy means, is right belief. So when we're talking about heresy as something over and against orthodoxy, we're talking about a dispute within the church. Okay? Quite often when you see heresy, you're thinking about people being burned at the stake. That's not what we're talking about. You know, that's what happens when the religious authorities get in power and start acting like civil authorities. What we're talking about with heresy is just a dispute within the Christian church of how it is that we ought to articulate our belief. Being a heretic doesn't actually make one unchristian. You know, if you look in the Bible, the one thing that we're really asked to articulate as Christians is Jesus is Lord. The rest of it is at different levels of importance, but is somewhere in a long list of things that we need to look at, but may not be core to our belief. And being a heretic doesn't deal with salvation. Okay? That's something it's hard for American Christians to get their minds around, is for a good majority of Christian history, salvation was not the primary question, because we come from an evangelical understanding. Even those of us who wouldn't consider ourselves evangelical, we live in a country that's gone through two great awakenings. So we tend to think in terms of it's all about salvation, it's all about getting saved, it's all about getting to heaven. That's not what's being talked about here. What's being talked about here is what does the church articulate as her teaching. Salvation truly is something that is up to God. You know, we know very little about exactly who is saved and exactly who isn't. That's really, you know, if I say I know you're going to be I'm going to be saved and you're not, then I'm putting myself in the place of God. And that's not a place that I'm willing to put myself. Some people may be willing to do that. I'm not. I don't believe I have the same amount of discernment or power as God does. So that's what we're looking at with literalism and heresy. Now,